Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Infrastructure and Environment Subcommittee for December. Thank you for making some time in the mid-month heading into the holidays to help us wrap up some of our business for this year. We do have a relatively full agenda, but we'll see how much time it takes for us to work through it. We may be able to be quick, or we may have to be quicker than we might have planned, depending on whether or not we are able to maintain our quorum. But we did first and foremost want to, I think, dive back into some of our environmental recommendations. And then we're going to be spending some time talking about how we want to prioritize our recommendations that we'll be submitting to the full body, which I'll go over a little bit more about the, sort of the parameters of that. But I think what we wanted to begin with is Representative Larry Lambert, who is a member of our group and also has another meeting to get to. And he was going to talk a bit about some of the work that he's doing, which has some overlap and we hope alignment so that we're not duplicating efforts. So Representative Lambert, if you're ready, I'm happy just to hand you the floor for as long as you need.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I'm happy to be a part of this wonderful committee and the outstanding work that has been going on. And I'm also happy to chair the Justice 40 Oversight Committee. In short, the Justice 40 Oversight Committee was established in alignment with House Concurrent Resolution 40, establishing the Justice 40 Oversight Committee here in Delaware. When President Biden first came into office, his third executive order, Executive Order 14008, was his executive order on climate change. And an important part of that executive order was what he referenced as the Justice 40 Initiative. It established that when it comes to federal infrastructure dollars dealing with environmental justice, climate change, sea level rise, et cetera, that when it came to those federal infrastructure dollars going to the 50 states, that at least 40% of those investment benefits goes to our overburdened communities. Those are our communities disproportionately impacted by pollution and poverty. A big part of that oversight committee, we've had 2 meetings. We've had 3 community listening sessions that were very robust and well attended, 1 listening session in each county. Where we stand now is that an important part of our oversight committee is to establish a mapping tool, not only to map our overburdened communities where they are, geospatially, but also to look at when these federal infrastructure dollars around environmental justice, sea level rise, et cetera, that are shared, when it comes to those federal investment benefits, it also tracks and maps where those monies go, where those benefits go. So in that regard, our next meeting, and I invite you all out, our next meeting is January 6th. And in that meeting, DNREC will be sharing their current mapping tools that they use, their environmental justice screening tool. And this week, it came to my attention that the state auditor's office has what they call the Gray Fox Initiative, which maps and tracks the ARPA funds and how they were dispersed across the state at the state level, county level, as well as the municipal level. So it's beautiful to see that our state has already utilized some of these opportunities to map and track investment benefits. So I do want to look at, ways that we can proceed forward. And I think that it's wonderful how a lot of the goals and initiatives of the Justice 40 Oversight Committee are in alignment with our wonderful Infrastructure and Environment Subcommittee of the African American Task Force. I do want to open it up if anyone has any questions.
We're looking for some hands. Now, Representative Lambert, I do have a question. I know there were a couple of items on our agenda that we are looking to potentially put forth as recommendations, but that may already be accommodated or being addressed through Justice 40's work. Is that something that you could speak to, where there's that overlap we should be aware of so that we're not duplicating the work of your efforts?
Absolutely. So when it comes to environmental justice issues, we see that environmental justice also includes economic justice. And that nexus is where the Justice 40 Initiative really lies. So in that regard, our main point of overlap is the mapping tool. And secondarily, it's establishing one of the recommendations in this committee here is establishing some kind of an interagency action council, action board. I remember Willie Scott had brought it up at the last meeting, an environmental justice board. So in that regard, while you guys have already initiated the work on that, we're going to let you continue to do so. I don't think of our two committees duplicating work. I look at our two committees complementing each other.
Okay.
So as we all know, environmental justice has a lot of different areas, and our committee is really focused on one specific area, which is ensuring that when it comes to federal infrastructure dollars around environmental justice and climate change, that at least 40% of those investment benefits goes to disadvantaged communities. So I do look forward to there being plenty of opportunities where we can synergize our efforts. Our committee is just hyper focused on that specific area.
Okay, excellent. That's really helpful. So there's nothing that we need to be taking off of our docket, just being mindful that we can be aligned and reinforce each other's work. So that's really helpful. And I think has the notification about the next meeting been disseminated? Maybe that's something that we can have Caitlin make sure that all the members of our subcommittee get, so that those who are interested can participate there as well.
Absolutely. So I think that we just locked it down yesterday. So as far as the specific time, we'll make sure everybody gets it. And we'll also send a little courtesy information too, so that you all can get caught up. I do recognize that a lot of our partners on the call today, this may be the first time you've heard of the Justice 40 Oversight Committee. So we look forward to you reaching out if you have any questions after this call.
Great. Thank you, Representative Lambert. Anyone else have any other questions or comments on that segment before we move along? I think if we do keep moving, and Representative Lambert, we have you till 10:30, right?
Absolutely.
All right, great. So that means that until you leave, we will have a quorum. So I think we're going to move into our voting items. And I will have, do we need to call attendance, Caitlin, or can we just keep it moving? And
I think we can keep it moving.
Okay.
We do have a quorum right now, and that will hopefully be revealed when we vote to
Yes,
accept the minutes.
Exactly. Wonderful. The first thing we're going to do before we get back into the environmental recommendations is just a quick acceptance of our meetings minutes from November. So I'd just be looking for a motion and a second to help us go ahead and do that.
One note. I'll let Dana explain.
Oh, okay. Dana, it sounds like maybe you have an edit.
I do.
Okay.
My recollection was that in the minutes, it says that we all voted yes to recommendation 1. And I believe we voted to edit recommendation 1 so that the first recommendation was the State Environmental Justice Board. And we did an edit so that it says DENREC should reserve seats, but DENREC doesn't do the placement of boards. Is actually the governor. So recommendation 2 and 1 are actually, recommendation 2 came from recommendation 1. And we worked to edit. That was my recollection of the past meeting.
Okay, so that recommendation 1 was revised to recommendation 2?
Yes.
Okay, yes, that's my recollection of it as well. So the language of recommendation 1 has sort of yielded to the language of recommendation 2, and that's what we adopted. So we just need to make sure the minutes reflect that.
Okay, so I remember that we made live edits as we were kind of going along.
Right.
And so I thought the notes that I had at the end reflected everything as it was passed. But what we're saying here is that this one right here, yes, this was tabled for further discussion because that's not actually how it works, right?
So hold on, let me take a look again at the establishment of the State Environmental Justice Board. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Oh, okay. So it was the discrepancy about DENREC's ability to reserve seats.
Right.
So that's not what recommendation 1 that was a separate one about the Environmental Justice Board as a specific entity. Recommendation 2, we did not vote on full stop.
Yeah, I think we were trying to think about how to incorporate, how to combine maybe 1 and 2. And my recollection was that, I think we were kind of in alignment around recommendation 1 that we should have an environmental oversight board, however you describe that, but also recognize that there were existing entities in place, and that there was an opportunity to upgrade those by incorporating recommendation 2 to reserve seats or establish seats for representatives from communities on existing appeal boards.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Willie. No, I recall that as well.
So
Mhm.
I added this note, after Dana emailed me, I added this note to the minutes. Subcommittee members discussed the proposed language. Live edits were made to reflect the discussion. Below is a list of the final recommendations as passed by the subcommittee. So I believe this is actually what everybody voted to approve for recommendation 1. Recommendation
Right.
number 2, though, that was tabled. So
Correct.
that was the wording of it, but it didn't pass. We decided not to pursue it.
We do not currently have a past recommendation that addresses DENREC's responsibility or
Right.
whoever's responsibility for placing representatives of environmental justice communities on that board or any other boards.
Yeah, I think to Dana's point, recommendation 2 to me kind of speaks to things like the Coastal Zone Appeals Board, as an example, which is an already established entity. It has members, but the notion here, I think, was to include community members on those types of boards that sit and hear appeals to rulings that were made by DENREC, for example. So I think, Dana, that was the intent for that particular one.
Yeah, I think I didn't communicate so for the first recommendation, my concern was that, and this is how recommendation 2 came up, is for the Environmental Justice Board, it says the board has the statutory authority to provide oversight for decisions affecting overburdened communities. And my concern was that I'm not clear how it would have that authority when DENREC has the EAB and the CZICB, and who would have the overarching authority to make those decisions. And so then I said, I understand what we're trying to do. And so it may be best to ask for a reserved seat of environmental justice, a representative on those boards that actually can overturn the secretary. So that was my recollection of it. Just because of that sentence, it says to the oversight for decisions affecting, well, we have those appeal boards already built into DENREC. And so it may be more efficient to have an EJ representative on those boards. But it's just that DENREC, it's governor appointed boards, governor appointed position. And that was my concern with the second recommendation. So that is, in my mind, that's how I was trying to explain it, but I may not have been clear in trying to decide to do recommendation 1 and 2.
No, I appreciate that. And so I think what we've concluded is that this does accurately reflect the record of our votes as we took them. I think particularly when we get into the portion where we're talking about prioritization or sort of reviewing our final recommendations, we can take into account perhaps some of those concerns that aren't reflected, that remain unresolved. But it sounds to me like our record is accurate in terms of how things were voted on. I think where my brain went at first was that we had said that we approved the DENREC reserving seats piece, but that doesn't, I don't see that in the minutes. So I think the minutes stand as written accurately, but we can revisit concerns in the substance of those as we move to decide how we're going to elevate these to the full board, if that is okay.
And I just made one more edit as we were talking. So below is a list of the final wording of the recommendations and the actions taken to reflect that, 2 of them were tabled and 2 of them were approved as written with the words that you see on the screen.
Okay, so the yellow is an edit that has been made to the minutes.
Correct.
So we need a motion to approve the minutes as edited.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent, thank you. Caitlin, roll call?
Okay, one moment. Let me get my participant list up. Okay. Senator Lockman.
Yes.
Okay, Willie Scott,
Yes.
Abby Samuels,
Yes.
Simone Philpotts,
Yes.
Dan Young,
Yes.
Dana Cobb,
Yes.
Representative Lambert.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but let's see here. One,
Abby Samuels?
Abby. I'm sorry, Abby.
No, you did call on me, but
Oh,
yes,
you did?
again.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My
No,
bad.
that's okay.
Okay, so who didn't I call? Because I thought we had 7 members present.
Did we lose someone? I see Simone, Willie, Abby, me, and Dan. Wait, I think that adds up to 7.
Did I call on Rep Lambert yet? Oh, yeah,
Yep,
we did. I'm
you
sorry,
did.
I can't count.
Okay, it kind of feels like a Monday today. I'm feeling it too.
It's totally
Um,
Monday. So yes, we have 7 members present and 7 members voting yes to approve the minutes as changed with the yellow highlighting.
Great. Okay. All right. So thank you all. We've got minutes. It's one piece of business we can chalk up. So we'll pull the presentation back up and move into our environmental related recommendations. I know we have quite a few of these, so we'll see how far we can get. We can continue a discussion of them, whether or not we have the ability to vote on them. But I believe we got through, did we get through all of Willie's, knowing that we tabled one? We ended at number 5. And then I believe at number 6, we begin with the ones that Dana brought us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we can just go ahead and get right back into it. And I think our goal for today will be to get through all of those that haven't been addressed in any form. So Willie, would you like to start with number 5?
Yes, I'll try to be brief. The intent of number 5 is to strengthen the Secretary's authority to impose penalties, or I guess, yeah, to strengthen his authority to impose penalties and fines for violations. And I think it's been several years since these penalties have been updated. They're basically limited. I mean, they're essentially based on time. So the number of days of violation constitute a certain amount of penalty maximum for either civil or administrative penalties. And, I think it's just appropriate that we go back now and take a look at those and see if they still reflect the current impact that, well, let's say that they still are relative to current state in terms of the overall impact that some of these violations may have to the state and to the state's residents. And I think also we need to take a look at the structure. And so rather than just being time-based, number of days of violation, there should be some sense for what's material to the violator. On one hand, if it's a small auto body shop or a local business, small business, there's got to be some rationalization as to what's appropriate. On the other hand, if it's a large multinational corporation, should the penalty structure be the same for those violators as it would be for a small business? So, for example, the Crota violation back in 2018 with the release of ethylene oxide that shut the bridge down. I think DNREC fined Crota like $250,000, 247, somewhere in that range. OSHA fined Crota another $250,000 to $60,000. And then I think there were additional monies paid for closing the bridge to the bridge authority. When you read Crota's financial reports for 2018, 19, and 2020, there's no mention of those penalties in there. Crota's a $2 billion corporation.
Right.
And the only mention they had of that whole event was they classified the shutdown of the plant as being a result of a small leak resulting from a failed gasket. So again, the scale of some of these things, I think, should be commensurate with the, I hate to say, the ability to pay, but what constitutes a material penalty for a violator. needs to be considered as well. So the whole intent here is to take a relook at that penalty structure, the fine structure, and to understand whether or not it's appropriate still for today's circumstance, and to look not just near term when we think about administrative penalties, for cleanup and oversight and that kind of thing, but what are the long-term implications for the state, long-term implications for state's residents, in terms of health or whatever, as it relates to, these violations.
Thank you, Willie. That's a good one. It seems like there's actually probably a lot of substance sort of lying beneath there in terms of the work to be done to determine what changes may be appropriate. Do we have any questions or comments from committee members on this particular one? Dana, eyes all go to you when if you have any thoughts on this one.
I hear everything Mr. Scott says. We have multiple penalties across multiple divisions, and I just think it's a lot to take in. I completely understand the thought process behind it. I just think that we would have to flesh it out and see what it looks like. I understand the big corporations versus the small mom and pops and the scale and all that. It's just a lot for me to.
Well, I mean, yes, I agree in the sense that I think this sounds very meritorious. I think where my only hang up is the sense of that we should pass legislation, I think, and I totally understand speaking within the subcommittee of a task force. This is like saying a bad word, but I'm like, it almost seems like something that calls for that level of focus of a group that's focused on reviewing and identifying, and making recommendations for those updates. So I don't know if that's something that we should be considering under our own purview as further work for us to do, or if that's, I think somewhat dependent on what the continuation of the African American Task Force looks like. But it definitely seems like there's a lot of homework and needed to figure out what does that legislation actually look like.
Yeah, I think Dana makes a great point. This does require a lot of study and analysis and try to understand what's appropriate, at each one of those scales or each one of those levels. And so maybe the thought here is really that, the task force may want to recommend that study take place to understand what would be appropriate penalties and fines going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then bring forward a recommendation to the General Assembly on what we need in terms of legislation and, the resulting regulations.
Okay. So do we want to, I would love to be able to take a vote on this. I know time's ticking away, but I'm trying to think of the best way to word it so that we might be able to pass it. I think most of the substance is there. I think where the sticky part is the General Assembly should pass legislation. I think the action is where we might need a little modification here in terms of what's the necessary, what would be a good next step? Are we looking at having the African American Task Force do further study, or are we asking perhaps the General Assembly to pass a resolution calling for an update to penalties? Might be.
Yeah, I think it's the latter.
Okay. So Caitlin, could we go ahead, pass a resolution calling for the update? And then I'll see if we have any questions on that. Any questions or concerns about maybe for a review 2 update?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Senator?
After calling for a review 2 update.
2
The
update.
penalties. I know, but now we're just fixing typos. And then take out the of after update. And then I think we have a clean, yes, Dana.
I'm sorry.
No, never apologize. This is why we're here.
I hear the word review, and I like maybe review makes. I thought we were talking about study and making sure that we had to make an informed decision. So review just makes me like, I think we should make it more data based.
Okay.
I don't know how to word it though. So I just threw my.
No, it's okay. Well, a resolution could call for a study of, how about that? Better reflect all condition. Are we comfortable with that language?
Do we want to provide recommendations as a result of the study?
Right.
I think with that, yes, I think a study of the penalties and fines. Perhaps at the end, the resolution, okay, yes, go ahead, good, Caitlin, go for it. For legislative action. Thank you, Simone, good catch. Okay, any thoughts or objections? All right, we'll look for, can we get a motion and a second and maybe a vote before we lose Representative Lambert? I know you're on very, very borrowed time. We could get you for another 60 seconds. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, Abby. Okay,
All right, I will go down our list. Senator Lockman,
yes.
Willie Scott,
Yes.
Abby Samuels,
Yes.
Simone Philpotts,
Yes.
Dan Young,
Yes.
Dana Cobb,
Going to abstain.
and Representative Lambert.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 6 members voting yes and 1 member abstaining.
Does that qualify as a passage?
I believe it does. So the
Okay.
majority of the people present voted yes.
Okay, good, great. Okay,
Thank you,
good.
Madam Chair and committee members. In case I don't see you, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Representative. Okay, so we won't be able to vote on these, but I think we can have some discussion on the next several. So Dina, would you like to walk us through some of what you have brought forward?
Sure, I think that most of them have been touched upon or
Okay,
so the first one is DEMREC and its effort to create an environmental justice mapping tool to incorporate into decisions and processes. I think I touched on this last meeting where I think that it's really important that we're all talking from the same definitions. And DEMREC could be leading the way in defining EJ areas and having it clear and concise. Even though there's overlap here in AATF and Justice 40, that we're all from the same playbook. So I thought that was important to put in. I'll stop there because I'll keep.
okay. Any questions on, I mean, these are efforts that are already underway, obviously.
Yes.
Yes. Any thoughts or comments from committee members on the nature of that recommendation? Okay, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. And unfortunately, we can't vote on it. Maybe that will change in the coming moments, but if not, we can certainly circle back and vote on these hopefully before too long. So number 7.
So this is based off of the public engagement work that DEMREC is doing with the Delaware State University to look at best practices. There has been a lot of media coverage about the study. So the first phase was getting an inventory of how DEMREC engages currently with the public, whether it be social media, public policy and the like. And then most recently we had some town hall meetings to get input. So this is the way DEMREC engages. How do you receive information? How would you like to receive information? And Del State will then go back and give us basically a gap analysis. These are some best practices. And so this recommendation is just saying that DEMREC should be looking at the tools that Delaware State University gives them and put them into action.
Okay. And when are the results of that study expected?
Sure. So we are finishing up year 1 of the 2-year study. So we're looking at the winter of 2022.
Okay. Nice. Any questions or comments? Thanks, Peter. Okay, moving right along.
Okay.
Oops.
Number 8, building on training given to managers in 2020, DENREC should train all employees in environmental justice philosophy and techniques. So we went through and did a top level EJ training with EPA and then another level training with our second level managers. And I think it is important, not only the philosophy and understanding redlining, but putting it into action. So what does EJ mean for an environmental scientist? What does it look like for education and outreach in some of our programs? And so making sure that we can take the philosophy and put it into action was really big for me. And so that's why. So like next level implementation. So we're going from theory to implementation in day-to-day.
So would there be a concrete goal in terms of, by such and such a point to have all DENREC employees, because I know it's a huge staff, but to have all employees trained in these?
I did not put a date. I think that the training will have to be specific and we'll be looking to do, in my opinion, this is Dana talking, be looking to have it a consultant. So it'll be really specialized. And so we would need to start looking into getting some specialized training.
Right.
In action. I did not put a specific date, but we can work it out.
Yeah, I think that might be interesting. Probably, and it sounds like due to that specialization, it might be more appropriate to think of a goal for beginning implementation as opposed to completing it, or maybe both. I don't know. But any questions on that one? I feel like I remember having a conversation, perhaps it's with Senator Pinckney, and I know that was one that really we found very appealing. And even thought about, perhaps at some point that goes beyond DENREC, but I know DENREC, as I said, huge to begin with, let alone looking at other agencies. Okay, if there are no other questions on that, yes?
Oh, sorry, Senator. I'm just typing some notes here so that when we do circle back, we can kind of have a sense of what was discussed. So.
Oh, no, that's great. That'll be helpful. Well, I'm hoping that, perhaps at some point, I guess it could be at our next meeting, we'll maybe be able to vote on these as a block if we feel like we have the right language. Okay, so the number 9.
Number 9, DENREC should create the department-wide position of Environmental Justice Coordinator, reporting directly to the Secretary, who can act as a liaison with EJ communities and ensure all divisions are properly incorporating EJ principles. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's important that we have consistency. DENREC is a huge department, and making sure we have consistency of message and action when it comes to EJ community and doing some best practices. I do have an update that the Secretary did put a proposed EJ coordinator in his request in the governor's budget. But
Oh, great. Yeah, that was going to be exactly my question. I was like, is this something we could expect to see, happening in this, upcoming fiscal year? And, I'm sure we could potentially get a recommendation for it before then, but as a member of JFC, I'm interested in hearing about that and having that as something to look out for. Yes, Willie.
I was just curious as what would be the difference between that role and the existing ombudsman, I can't say the word,
Yeah.
ombudsman's role.
I can't say the role either. Number 1, I think it's important that we need to build out these positions. We have about 700 DENREC employee, I can't say the word, Mr. Willie. And we have a little under 1 million Delawareans that we're having to service. And so I think it just strengthens our presence in the community. We're starting to build up specifically environmental justice for environmental justice communities.
So would you see this role as having broader authority versus the current old word?
O word. It sounds like it might be a bit more of a proactive role. I'm not sure what the job description of an ombudsperson looks like necessarily, but it feels like perhaps it's a bit more responsive to concerns, responsive to complaints, as opposed to proactively. At least that's the way I picture it in my mind. I'm not sure
Exactly.
how that actually plays out in practice. Mhm.
And I guess the other thought I was having when I saw this one earlier, do you see, Dana, that there may be some relationship between this role and this oversight board that we talked about in recommendation 1?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm all about partnership. So I think that having one point and making sure that we have some, like I said, some consistency in the department is great. The ombudsman, I said the word, the ombudsman role is very broad. In my mind, the environmental justice coordinator can be very focused. And I just think it's direct and it's intentional. And so that's why it was important to have it there.
Right.
Nice. Okay.
Sorry, I muted and I didn't realize it was still me.
Oh yeah, I think is this the final?
Yes.
Wow, we are cooking through. Okay.
I'm from New Jersey. I talk fast under. DEMREC should make it easier for the public access to current data information that can be used by residents to assess DEMREC work, access DEMREC work, I should say, and data in their community. So this was directly, the Royal, we heard you when we had a couple of meetings, and it was a question like, well, how do I get there? And I think that is an awareness, when you're working every day in the data, it seems like, oh, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're having to be intentional and step back and say, but can I explain this to my neighbor who doesn't know anything about DEMREC? And is it ease of use? And so while we may be doing that on specific things, like when we're doing the climate action plan, because that's my wheelhouse. When we're doing the climate action plan, we're making sure that any Delawarean can pick it up. You don't have to have a degree in science or climatology to do this thing. We need to just be more intentional, and we're looking to do that so that we're not just getting this great data and we're so busy doing the things but we're doing a good job communicating, which will also tie into the work that we're doing with Del State and how we present the data so that it is digestible. So it's everything working together to make sure that not only are we doing the work, but we're presenting it in a way that's easy to digest and access.
So is the second, this is just a wordsmithing question. Should it be access at both points in that statement, or access and then assess? It should be access both times.
Yeah, I think so.
So is this something that you're thinking in terms of like a dashboard or a way of sort of visualizing, impacts and things like that?
Yeah, I think that I'll use Healthy Communities as an example. Our partners do an amazing job of presenting their really complex data in a way that can be understood. We're seeing that people receive information better when it's in maps and pictures and those types of things. And so DEMREC going more towards that area is what we're looking at, especially my small group. But overall, as an agency, we're just looking to make sure that we're not just doing the work, but making sure that we are servicing Delawareans by making sure they can access the data that we're doing.
Yeah, I was actually at a conference last week, and former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley, was talking about the way they visualized work. And I actually became somewhat obsessed with it. I bought a workbook and everything. And it was talking about using like the stat systems like we use on the city level for policing data, or sort of crime data, really, I guess is the proper term. They were using on these sort of agency levels on the state level to talk about other types of data too. It's super interesting, very, very map forward. So I'll send you the link to the book if you're interested. Okay, any questions or comments on that one? I think these are all pretty straightforward, and I think they're all sort of looking to build on or on some level sort of codify or support things that are really already happening in DNREC, right? So I think that makes these definitely low-hanging fruit, I think, for us to be aware of, certainly. And I think if we're so inclined to offer extra support, especially in some of these areas that may require budget adjustments. All right. So if there are no questions, we still can't vote on these, which is super unfortunate. But I also think, maybe if we want to scroll up, I think, do we feel based on the notes, maybe this is just something we can ponder for the next meeting, that do we need any, language adjustment on that second set, sort of 7 and down? I think would just be something to think about. And then our last agenda item is really about how do we now take these and move these up. I'm not sure how many of you are able to or have attended our full body meetings, but we do have a rule that we can only bring 2 to 3. I think it's sort of implied we're really supposed to bring 2 recommendations forward at each full body meeting, which are bi-monthly. So obviously I think we've put forward put a lot on the table, which is fantastic, but then the pace of what we can actually get sort of codified in the full African American Task Force set of recommendations is limited to some degree. So I think, again, we won't be able to vote on this, but I wanted us to have the opportunity to think about the recommendations that we now kind of have in our quiver that we have voted to approve, that are really ready to go to that next level, and to be thinking about, how do we want to line those up so that Senator Pinckney and I know really in what order to be elevating those. Do we have some that feel more urgent, or that we would just like to move forward faster? I believe our next full body task force meeting is it in January?
Yes, it's Monday, January 24th from 4 to 6 p.m. And so we, as a subcommittee, will be meeting once more before the full body meeting. So we will have a chance to hopefully pass a few more recommendations that could then get elevated.
Yeah. So how many do we have in the pipeline now? I don't know if sorry to make you switch screens again, but I know, we do still have a couple of housing ones hanging out there.
Yes, unfortunately, that's not a straightforward question to answer. I'd have to get a couple different documents up, but
Okay.
let me work on that in the back.
Okay, no worries. But I know we have some that are fully approved. We have some that are tabled that we, may want to have additional conversations on. But I think we certainly have more than enough for probably the next 6 months of full task force meeting. So since we can't vote on it today, I don't know that we need to get into a full discussion of those. But I think the next step then, maybe pending our January meeting, would be so that you don't have to do it on the fly now, Caitlin, for us to share with you. Oh, there we go.
I found the document.
Wow, that was fast.
So not including the one that we just passed today.
Okay.
This list shows everything that the subcommittee has passed or that the full body has passed, which would require the subcommittee having passed it first. So this one is already taken care of. This one is already taken care of.
And then the rest. So yeah, so maybe a document for the subcommittee that shows sort of what has yet to be elevated.
Sure.
And including our new ones, and then maybe it's kind of a footnote, the ones that are tabled or have yet to be voted on, so we can kind of consider everything that's before us and figure out, how to prioritize these. I'm not sure how I think it's pretty successful, I guess, when we do, would like a Google survey be a helpful way to sort of pull people on this before we gather again? Maybe to kind of, I don't know if we can rank and kind of see what kind of consensus we have and then kind of have that as a platform for discussion. But as you can see, I'm very proud of the subcommittee. We've been very productive. We have a lot on the table, as I said, and now it's a matter of figuring out, which two get to be the next in line for us to bring before the full body. And I think, the reason for that is a very, it's understandable because we do end up having to make pretty extensive presentations to the full body, knowing that a lot of, the folks sitting on that body haven't been privy to all the conversations we've been able to have to understand why we're bringing these forward. And so that's work for Caitlin, and that's time and discussion that ends up happening there so that we don't end up being able to do everything at once. But yeah, so I think, unless someone has an alternative suggestion, I think our next step would be prior to our next gathering to share with you what is still on the table, either approved by us or pending approval, and give you the opportunity to weigh in on how you would like to see what remains prioritized for elevation. Any questions or comments about that? Caitlin, did I get that right, sort of operationally?
Yes, yep. So I will compile a list of all of the subcommittee recommendations that have not yet been elevated to the full body. Then I will use that list to create some sort of Google survey so that members can rank which ones they think are more important to elevate to the full body. And then that can be the basis of our discussion when we meet again in January. And that meeting date will be January 19th.
Okay, great. Okay, good. That gives us some time to do that. Whoops. Okay. So I think we have a plan of action and good work that has been accomplished. And if we don't have any other questions, I think the business that we're able to do today is concluded. Was there anything else besides public comment? And I think we just had the DENREC Chief of Staff, who's welcome to comment. Mr. Patterson, if you like. But if not, I think we're giving you back more than an hour on your December Wednesday. So, okay, if hearing that, no comments. And for anyone who may be watching this later on, of course, you can email your thoughts and comments to us at africanamericantaskforce@delaware.gov. We'd be happy to hear from you and your thoughts on the work that we're doing. Oh, did you want to say something, Greg? So you've been unmuted. Maybe not.
As
That's okay. All right. Well, I'll take the silence as a motion to adjourn for today. And everyone have wonderful holidays. If I don't see you, hopefully I will see you in various venues. And I will definitely see you in mid-January to continue our work. Thanks very much.